I am a feminist, always have been. I have come to understand how important it is that as a woman, you are financially independent.
It's Danusia here. Now, the idea of financial independence, it's not independence as in wealth, as much as having the choices that women need to thrive in life via money. What about buying shoes that fit our kids' feet, putting food on the table, and providing a safe, warm home? For many parents, that is thriving. My guest today is Wies Bratby, founder of Women in Negotiation and, in her own words, lawyer turned HR director turned women's butt kicker. She means that in the nicest possible way. Promise. We explore the importance of negotiating pay in women's careers and how to negotiate with partners too. Because we all know that this is a bit of a deal breaker, something most of us struggle with. And if it isn't partners, it's kids. Negotiating is a big deal. I'm curious how you came to realize that negotiating pay is key to women's success.
It was actually a different realization. It was the realization that it was such an issue for them.
Oh, great. Wonderful. I love it when something like that gets tweaked. Say that again for us.
Negotiating your worth is a massive problem for women. And so the one thing I know a ton about is negotiating, because it's been my personal obsession since I was little. I came to realize, this is a big issue for anybody, but specifically for women. And why I chose to focus on career negotiations and salary negotiations is because those are the most difficult ones that you can have. The most difficult type of negotiation is a career negotiation, is a salary negotiation, because it's in the context of an ongoing relationship. It is ultimately talking about the worth, the value of the work that you contribute, i.e., the value of you, and it has the biggest impact on your life. Negotiating a 5% salary increase at age 30 when you're making, say, 100K, over the course of 30 years, if you don't change anything but just get your annual, 4% increase, that 5-minute conversation that you have to get a 5% increase leads to 300K almost at the end of your career than if you didn't have that 5-minute conversation, right? We're talking massive amounts of money, and especially when you consider that this is a super unrealistic scenario. And most women actually do change jobs over the course of their career. And so whether you negotiate those times or whether you just take the small increase that is given to you, as an incentive to take the job, the numbers go from, say, 300,000 to millions. So career negotiations, salary negotiations absolutely freaking matter. And so that's why I decided to teach this one, because I thought if you can nail the most difficult one, then everything after that's a piece of cake.
Yeah, exactly.
To your partner, it's like a whole different ballgame. Or if you're then talking, if you're buying a house, like piece of freaking cake.
Let's just cut to the chase. Women are poorer. Women are poorer in the world because they don't know how to negotiate, and they take what's given them rather than negotiate.
Yeah, I actually want to jump in here and say that I don't just agree with the idea of women end up poor, and that the possibility, the risk of that happening is a reason to really get good at this and, to take precautions, right? I would go a step further and say preempting that whole situation altogether, I think, is a reason to be financially independent, or to at least have the possibility to get to that situation. I think it's the most romantic thing in the history of the universe to be financially independent, to have an outside income that guarantees that you are not with your partner because you have to be. Because if you don't, you can't give your kids the life that you want, or you can't lead the life that you want, that you've gotten used to, whatever. I think it's incredibly romantic to choose every day, I am with you because I really want to be with you. You're the right person for me. And I think that's where I often get into discussions with particularly women, actually, where I honestly believe that it is a great idea to be able to be independent, potentially independent, right? That you need to focus on doing that, and that it will improve your relationship if there is no dependency one way or another.
Yeah, I really love the take that you have on this, because this whole romantic package that so many women succumb to or just follow, because it is the model that we've been taught, which is you meet a lovely guy, or clearly this is a highly heterosexual model. That's obvious. Yeah. You meet this guy, you fall in love, you almost meld into him. I can't think of the word, but you don't keep your separation. You absolutely integrate. And the integration, particularly around money, almost represents that you're solid and kind of, the more you can integrate, the more likely that you are that, you're going to stick together. It's such bullshit.
It is.
Here's what Wies said when I asked her what money means to her.
The salary that you earn is a representation of the value that, your company attaches to the work that you do, to your worth, right?
Yes.
And so that is why it matters. It means respect. It means opportunities. It means, as I said, value, basically. So that is why it matters. And the other side, why to me it matters so much, is that it does give you freedom. Having money gives you freedom. It gives you the freedom to choose a different life for yourself. It gives you the freedom to choose a different job. So for me, money is simply a means. And it's a means, it's a way to freedom and to having different options and to being able to do different things.
What are the 3 top things that you would say, women need to do? How do you negotiate?
Ooh, top 3 tips. There is so much. And I don't want to hand out Band-Aids, as I always say, when people need surgery.
Exactly.
Right? So I don't want to reduce this to some kind of quick and dirty tips and tricks.
No.
I think the most important thing, and we have talked about this separately, is you need to have the conversation at home. If we're talking specifically about mothers and about work and negotiating that, I would say something that's completely underappreciated, I think, is the importance of being a team with your partner and making it work with your partner. And that begins at home, at the kitchen table, having that conversation and making sure that you're in this together and that you're supporting one another. Because what happens so unbelievably often is that if we come out of a situation where we've maybe stayed at home with the kids and we want to go back to work, or simply this has gone on from when we got together maybe with our partner, we were both working, then kids came along and we dropped out of the workforce completely or part-time and we want to step it up again. If we have that kind of background, I think it takes a ton of work to make sure that you don't end up in a situation where you're taking the job, but you're also doing the work that you used to do, i.e. all the labor at home, right? All the chores, all the kid stuff, all the emotional labor. And what we know from the research is that that is so much. Across the world, women take on 2/3 of that versus 1/3 of men. And when I share that statistics, there's a lot of women who burst out laughing and say, it's more like 99 to 1%, or, a variation of that. So we know that on average, women tend to do a lot more there. And I think it's a recipe for freaking disaster. It's a recipe for resentment, for depression, for general tiredness, for dropping out of your career because it is too hard, for, general unhappiness, mental, physical tiredness, all of that for women.
The unbalanced division of domestic labour was first called the double shift. This has been replaced by recognition of the triple shift or triple burden. We've somehow been sold the idea that a real woman can bring home the bacon, cook it, clean the pan, and mop the kitchen floor while helping the kids with their homework, running their baths, and popping to the shops to buy the mother-in-law a birthday card. Because there's room for 3 standard work shifts in a 24-hour day, so if you're operating under the triple burden, your work is never done. It simply starts again. Let's get to those top tips, but first, I had an important question. How do you get on the same page, please?
I think generally speaking, when it comes to negotiating, we tend to focus on positions. So we tend to focus on the wants that we have versus the wants that somebody else has. So you might say, I want you to pick up the kids from school 5 days a week and I'll drop them off or something like that. Whereas that's not important for your partner or not, they can't do that. So they'll say, I can do 2 days a week. And then you suddenly have this weirdo fight between 5 days or 2 days or, something like that, right? People talk about what it is that they want. Generally speaking, the Harvard negotiation method, which is the sort of standard method on or work on negotiation, what that teaches us is that we should focus on the interest, meaning the reasons behind the what's, right? So instead of saying, 5 versus 2 days a week of pickup, we explain why it's really important to us that we have the afternoons, that we don't need to rush in the afternoons because, XYZ reason. We explain that so that it's easier for the other side to explain why it is important that they get only 2 days, so to say, and that you together come to an agreement or come to an understanding. So the chance of an understanding happening is much more likely when you're talking about the reasons behind the positions than when you're only talking about the positions. It basically becomes a fist fight, right? And you usually end up with a compromise, which is the worst possible outcome. Another word for compromise is lose-lose, because neither party gets what they set out to get. Whereas that cliche of a win-win agreement is much more likely to happen when you share why it is important and you're also intently focused on understanding the other side. That usually helps a lot, both in the conversations that you have with your partner or the conversations that you have with your boss or whoever. In any negotiation situation, this usually helps change the dynamic and has a much bigger a chance of success.
Let's see if this is Wies's first top tip.
My first one is really focus on interest, not positions, okay? Very much, and have the conversation at home. I think we've kind of covered those. When we're taking that conversation to our workplace and we're saying negotiate in the workplace, what these women around the world were telling me, what I'm okay when I negotiate for others, when I have to do it on behalf of my company, when I have to defend my kids at school, I'm a freaking mama bear, don't even touch my parents, you know what I mean? So if it's for others, we're extremely good negotiators. We struggle when it comes to negotiating for ourselves. So another tip would be to heavily rely and be aware of the skill set that you bring to the table in order to have that, conversation the right way for a successful outcome, both for the other side and for yourself. You can read a book, you can follow a course, but if you don't change your mindset around your worth, if you don't change your confidence, you absolutely need at that point is this realization that even without the theory, even without any of that, you have exactly what it takes to have a great negotiation with a great outcome.
So really, it's a replication of what we do constantly, and it's a win-win. The art of negotiation. It's an ask. It's a wanting. And in some ways, you're just reminding me in this conversation, or you are reminding me of the fact that we so often don't ask for ourselves.
No.
It is for others. I know we've mentioned that already, but it's almost like we need to have our appetite, be aware of our appetite for what we want for ourselves. And so many women don't. They take what is offered and feel lucky.
What I'm hearing you say is there's two things. On the one hand, women need to first have this want, right? This realization of this is what is important to me. And then the other thing, I think, is the difficulty that we have in conveying, in communicating these wants the proper way.
Yes.
I think here's the important thing to remember. When we negotiate for a pay rise, just to use that example, it may feel, because of our socialization, because of what the world tells us, as a greedy thing, like we're greedy people for wanting more. I want to make sure that women understand that when they go to their bosses to ask for more money, they're not doing that for themselves. Sure, they are benefiting. Sure, their family is benefiting from it. But who's really benefiting? The company that they work for. The company is going to pay them more money. They are the true winners here. And I think as soon as you realize you're not a greedy bitch, you're not a selfish person for wanting to be seen, for wanting to be paid well, for wanting to be valued, I think it makes it easier to actually have those conversations. These conversations are about how much magic can we do together, right? They're simply focused on the work and on what needs doing and on how much goodness you can do, you can produce together. And then the money conversation kind of follows. It's a very easy conversation that you have at the end of that.
It means that it's really possible when we reframe it as how much magic can we do together. And when we realize we already have the skills, they're sitting inside of us, we might need some help to express them and learn some techniques for that, but that actually the real winners are the companies. And then we get to have the freedom to choose options in life as women and to be, freer. Wies reminds us that negotiation isn't about greed. It's about knowing our worth and aiming for win-win outcomes. We already have the skills. It's just a matter of shifting our mindset, valuing ourselves, and confidently engaging in these conversations. Next time you're negotiating, whether at work or home, remember Wies's advice. Focus on interests, not positions, and don't hesitate to ask for what you deserve. You've got this. Check the show notes for links to Wies's work and the Harvard negotiation method. Until next week, keep thinking and take care.